recent years there has been a lot of talk about spin-offs, reboots and revivals. The reaction to these have either been a lot of hate or a lot of love, but an aspect of this side of entertainment I have been thinking about are the spin-offs that involve the main characters being aged down as a way to create a new TV show. Usually they do this to appeal to a younger audience, and this trope is often referred to as a spin-off baby. In this video I'll be looking at not just baby versions but also teen and toddler versions of your favourite characters, questioning why these shows were made. In this video I shall be discussing spun-off shows that centre around younger versions of the original show, so shows like All Grown Up, which is aged up versions of the original characters, and other type of shows like that I will not be discussing. And shows like Pink Panthers and Son or Cave Kids, where they follow the children of the main show, are also not included in this category. And finally, I will not be discussing Tiny Toons, since those are not younger versions of the Looney Tunes, they're just heavily inspired by the main characters. And all the spin-off babies I'm discussing are animated, so no Young Sheldon. Let's start from the beginning with Muppets Babies. But first we have to talk about the show and the movies it is spun off from. The Muppets are a group of puppets that have been popular since their debut in 1955, created by Jim Henson. Since being made, they have starred in movies like The Muppet Movie, The Great Muppet Caper, The Muppet Christmas Carol, Muppet Treasure Island. Overall, they have appeared in 10 movies, both on the big screen and TV movies. Since their rise to popularity, they have been featured in a lot of things, such as video games, theme park attractions, Ripped in Muppet 3D, as well as books and web series. But one of the Muppets' biggest successes was The Muppet Show, which was a variety sketch show that started in 1976 and lasted till 1982 for 5 seasons, totaling 120 episodes. These episodes featured various famous guest stars such as Steve Martin, Christopher Reeve, Diana Ross, and Elton John. This show was aired all over the world and garnered an international fan base. So when the show ultimately came to an end, they wanted to keep milking the Muppet hype. Muppet Babies is considered the pioneer of the spin-off baby trope. Coming out in 1984, Muppet Babies is about aged-down versions of our favourite characters at a daycare run by this elderly lady. The first time the Muppets appeared as babies was in the movie Muppets Take Manhattan. The main Muppets that appeared in the show were Kermit, Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Animal, Rolf, Gonzo and Scooter. And then they had this random twin sister of Scooter who appeared out of nowhere called Skeeter. Skeeter is the only Muppet character made specifically for this show, as the show had a mainly male cast, so they added her to balance it out. To give more detail about the show, it's set at a daycare that is run by Nanny, who is another headless adult that appears in animation. There are so many of them. Each episode, the babies are presented with a problem. Like in the first episode, they get a noise complaint from a neighbour, or they have a loose tooth. Then each episode, the group has a fantasy about the issue and figure out how to solve their problems. In the episode with the neighbour with the noise complaint, the kid's problem was keeping Animal quiet so it wasn't noisy anymore. So they used their fantasy game to distract him. The fantasies often feature live action clips that are relevant to what the Muppets are talking about. I'd find that so interesting. Other than the core 8, other Muppet characters do appear in the show, most often Bunsen and Beaker. Sometimes a little tadpole version of Robin appears, and in season 7 and 8, Bean Bunny, Statler and Waldorf appeared every once in a while. This show was a huge success, lasting 8 seasons, 107 episodes, starting in 1984 and finishing in 1991. For many kids that grew up in the 80s, when they think of the Muppets, this is their first thought. Fun fact, Frank Welker, the voice of Fred, played Kermit in this. This show was so successful that almost 40 years later, they tried to bring it back in 2018, because who needs original ideas anymore? This show, the main cast was whittled down to Miss Piggy, Kermit, Fozzie, Gonzo, Animal, and that's it. Skeeter and Scooter still exist and did make an appearance once or twice. Getting rid of Skeeter brings the problem of the cast being too male-centered, so they introduced this new character called Summer Penguin, who again was just made for this show. As you could probably guess, she's a penguin. They also replaced Nanny with Miss Nanny, who is the daughter of Nanny, and she's still headless. The show still revolves around the young Muppets using their imagination to solve their regular problems, and they sometimes sing. Obviously, since it's been 30 years, the characters look different. It's in 3D, and if you look closely, the Muppets are actually made out of puppet material, which I found really interesting, and you can see their fur and their felt move with them. Statler and Waldorf appear in this again as the neighbours, and they just watch the Muppets from their house and commentate over what they're doing. This show only lasts for 3 seasons, from 2018 to 2022, with 71 episodes, with some specials and short in 2018. The reason this show probably might have been due to the lawsuit between the show's original writer and Disney, but who knows. The way I'm going to judge most of these spin-offs is by figuring out if Aiden and other characters added anything to the franchise, because yes, all of these are cash grab because that's what studios want to do, make money, but you can make money and make a good story. Obviously, a lot of these shows are not trying to be prequels to the original show, movie or comic that came before, but if you're going to use characters that have already been established, they have to be somewhat similar to the older versions we know and love. So I'm going to judge whether it's a possibility that even in an alternative universe, these characters could have grown up to be somewhat close to their original versions. And I've got to give credit where credit is due. This was the first in a long line of spin-off animated shows. It was a well-liked show, and after watching a few episodes, I would have enjoyed it as a kid, which is what is most important out of all of this. Whilst the stories were nothing that unique, that only the Muppets could have portrayed it, they were still fun. The characters were accurate to their older counterparts. Miss Piggy was with her bossy behaviour, Fozzie with his bad joke, Gonzo with his gonzo-ness. These were definitely aged down somewhat accurately, so no, this show does not reveal anything new about the Muppets, nor does it give us a form of origin story for them, but it was a fine show. Saying all that, the Muppet Babies is the most recent addition to the Muppet franchise, so at least it's being kept alive. Looney Tunes has been around since 1930, starting it as animated shorts, and as time progressed, they made movies, TV shows, they've done it all. Over its almost 100-year run, Looney Tunes has numerous standout stars, such as Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Wile E. Coyote, Foghorn Leghorn, Lola Bunny, and so many more. It's not surprising that such a long-lasting franchise would try and keep up with modern times. And what was something that was really popular in recent years? Aging down their characters, and that's how we got Baby Looney Tunes. Baby Looney Tunes is about aged down versions of our favourite characters at a daycare run by this elderly lady. That sentence might seem familiar to you, as it is the exact same description I gave for Muppets Babies. I did realise after watching Muppet Babies for the first time that Baby Looney Tunes copied it bar for bar. In Baby Looney Tunes, the main Looney Tunes that we see are Bugs, Lola, Daffy, Sylvester, Tweety and Taz as the main babies, and they're always at Granny's house. Then we had Petunia and Melissa, who came every once in a while. The two main adults in the show are Granny, who is the primary caretaker in most seasons, and Floyd, who is her nephew that came around to help every once in a while. But in the final season of the show, Granny was not in it as much, and Floyd was there taking care of the babies most of the time. Granny is an actual Looney Tunes character, as she normally owns Sylvester and Tweety. Floyd is a new character. Whilst those were the main characters and recurrent characters, they were not the only notable characters. Other Looney Tunes characters made cameo appearances, like Foghorn, Elmer, Pepe, but mainly I remember the appearance of Marvin. They bullied this poor kid because he didn't talk. Everyone bullied him except for Taz. We stand Taz, another kid who doesn't talk that well. I have vivid memories of watching this show. I remember episodes like the time that Bugs and Daffy were making lemonade stands, episode when they visited the apple picking place, but mainly the thing that is at the forefront of my mind is the cinnamon episode. This episode has been permanently imprinted in my brain, and whenever I see or hear about a cinnamon roll, I think of this episode. This show ran from 2002 to 2005 with 4 seasons of 53 episodes, but the show is still rerunning on networks like Cartoon Network, Boomerang and Cartoon Network, depending where you are in the world. As much as I did love the show as a kid, they really could have done this show with any franchise. It's clear none of these characters grow up to be their adult counterpart. None of them had any similar personality traits. None of them act like their older versions. Tweety and Sylvester are best friends in this show, and no one can convince me that they went from this to Sylvester trying to eat Tweety. They just wanted to use recognizable franchise to help the show get viewers, and it worked. I was firmly sitting watching the show. The Flintstones is an animated sitcom centered around the family, the Flintstones, which is comprised of Fred, Wilma, Pebbles, Dino, and Baby Puss, which is a very unfortunate name. The show is set in the Stone Age, and everything is made of rock. They have the Stone Age version of 60s technology, because that's when the show came out. Another important family in the show is the Rubble family, who are the neighbors of the Flintstones. The Rubble family is comprised of Barney, Betty, Bam Bam, and Hoppy, who I do not remember at all, as he was only in the later seasons. The show is just suburbia life set in the Stone Age. The show first aired in 1960 and ran for 6 seasons with 166 episodes and concluded in 1966. Even 60 years later in 2025, the show is still very popular, and they are making a new animated movie for the show, so it's not surprising that in the 20 years after the show concluded, they made a spin-off baby called The Flintstones Kids. This show is really weirdly set up. Some of the episodes are just following the Flintstones kids, like this one episode Fred is learning magic for his school talent show. That is the entire first episode. Then the next episode, episode 2, is broken up into 3 different segments. The Flintstone Funnies is a fantasy segment based around popular movies at the time, so they do a little parody. Another segment is called Dino Dilemmas, and it's just Adventures of Dino. The final segment follows Captain Caveman and his son, which is a TV show in the Flintstones universe. I spent ages trying to figure out why I recognize this character. The reason I recognized him is because he was in Scooby-Doo Laugh Olympic, which I did watch multiple times. They also based his design on the Slag Brothers. Again, a fortunate name. They're from the Wacky Races, which I also watched a lot as a kid. I also feel like I have to mention the Just Say No campaign they did in the Flintstones Kids, where they had a parody of Michael Jackson and there was a kid smoking weed. The show ran from 1986 to 1987 with 2 seasons and 36 episodes. The show was fine. I actually preferred the short segment. The Flintstones Kids was kind of boring. These characters are pretty similar to their adult counterparts, so I'm not sure how long dinosaurs live. That can't be the same dinosaur they had in the original show. Next up is Tom and Jerry, which is about the titular characters Tom, the house cat, and Jerry, the house mouse. While Tom is meant to be in the house and lives with the owners of the house, Jerry lives in the walls, unwanted. That sounded really mean. Sorry, Jerry. The whole show is just Tom trying to get rid of or catch Jerry, but it never works out. These two have been fighting each other since 1940. They have been in countless shorts, movies, and TV shows together. I vividly remember the Tom and Jerry movie, The Fast and the Fury, as women get stuck in quicksand. In 1990, the Tom and Jerry Kids started as this franchise's version of spin-off baby. It was basically just a classic shorts, aged down, whereas other Tom and Jerry content around the 80s was putting them in strange situations, like Tom and Jerry, the movie, was about Tom and Jerry and this author named Robin. Then in the 2000s, they went to space, helped Santa, and became spies. They were very busy in the 2000s. Tom and Jerry Kids was full of segments, the first one being just about Tom and Jerry. Then there was Blast Off Buzzard, Calaboose Cow, Wild Mouse, Slowpoke, Antonio, Spike, and Tyke, and lastly Droopy and Dripple, which did get a spin-off series. Tom and Jerry Kids ran from 1990 to 1993 with 4 seasons and 65 episodes. This is definitely one of the more accurate spin-off babies. I could believe Tom and Jerry Kids grew up to be Tom and Jerry. There was no real point of aging them down. They could have just made a new show of them being adults because these are so similar to the original. Now I want to talk about a modern one to spice this up, as the ones I've been talking about are like 40 years old. Now to talk about the only show Nickelodeon seems to remember it makes, SpongeBob. In case you're somehow unaware of SpongeBob SquarePants, it is a show about a sponge called SpongeBob that lives in a pineapple under the sea with his pet snail Gary. He lives next to his co-worker Squidward and his best friend Patrick. He works at a fast food restaurant called the Krusty Krab and he can't drive. SpongeBob could be classed by some as annoying and a bit over the top, but he's just loving life and looks forward to every day he experiences. The show is full to the brim with insanity and chaos that have fueled this show for over 26 years. It being so successful, it is not shocking. It has had movies, books, video games, and obviously spin-offs. The spin-off we are talking about today, Camp Coral, which is when SpongeBob is a preteen. They send him to a camp called Camp Coral. They really try to cram in all the main SpongeBob characters into the spin-off. The Mr. Krabs is the camp director who has his daughter Pearl with him. Some of the other campers are just aged down main characters such as Patrick, Sandy, and Squidward. Mrs. Puff is there too as a scoutmaster who does the arts and crafts. Of course, Plankton is there to be a thorn in everyone's side, along with Karen, who is not married to yet in the series. The two new main characters are Narlene and Nobby. These two are narwhal siblings that SpongeBob meets at camp, who do eventually start appearing in the main series. There are other new characters such as Predatory, Roxy, Jimmy, Blobfish. Then there's a bunch of young versions of SpongeBob characters that aren't that important, but they appear. This show ran from 2021 to 2024 with 2 seasons and 39 episodes. This show is obviously not set in the SpongeBob canon, as Mr. Krab and SpongeBob met for the first time when he hired him to work at the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krab and Mrs. Puff didn't meet until years after. Sandy did not move to Bikini Bottom until adulthood, so a lot of differences from the main show. Other than being inaccurate to the SpongeBob series timeline, I would say the characters are believably aged down. If you shoved all the notable townsfolk into a camp, I do believe this is what it would be like. Scooby-Doo is an animated mystery solving show about this group of meddling kids and their dog who travel around in their van called the Mystery Machine, and they solve crimes that appear to be performed by supernatural beings. The first Scooby-Doo series was Scooby-Doo Where Are You?, which started in 1969 with 3 seasons and 41 episodes. Since then, it has made over a dozen series in the main Scooby-Doo franchise, and the main characters have appeared in countless other shows such as Johnny Bravo, Batman Brave and the Bold, Supernatural, among others. So yet again, it's not surprising that the Scooby-Doo franchise made a spin-off baby called A Pup Named Scooby-Doo. I used to wake up at 5 AM to watch the show before school. A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, Top Cat, Wacky Races, Utterly and Muttley only aired at 5 to 7 AM on Boomerang, and I was going to watch all of it. Shaggy, Scooby, Fred, Velma, and Daphne are all a part of the Scooby-Doo detective agency in this show. Fred is still the leader of the gang and making traps. I would say my favourite recurring bit that the Fred character did in the show was have him constantly accusing this kid called Red Herring of being the perpetrator of all the mysteries that they were investigating. This show did teach me what a red herring is. It's something in a story that's used to mislead the readers from solving the mystery. Daphne coming from Wells is nothing new to the Scooby-Doo franchise, but they really leaned in on it in this version when Daphne often summons her butler to help with cases. Velma has 2 really cool inventions in the show. Firstly, her motorized skateboard, and secondly, this massive computer that she lugs around in this tiny briefcase somehow. The show was also the return of Fred and Velma, who were both removed from the main Scooby-Doo franchise in the 70s and replaced with Scrappy. I really like the monsters design in this show. I think it's some of my favourite in the franchise. They look so interesting to me. The show was not as long as I thought. It started in 1988 and ran until 1991 with 3 seasons and 27 episodes. I thought there was way more. Scooby-Doo does not have a strict lore. In some shows, they have known each other since childhood, and others they didn't meet until teenhood, so there's no conflict in lore there. The show was also the first time in the franchise where the Scooby-Doo gang stays in one location and are not travelling around either America or the world. Other shows after this would follow their example, like Mystery Incorporated and Shaggy and Scooby Get a Clue, as those were set in one location. In the show, they had a base, and I found it so cool. They had a treehouse base, and I wanted it so badly. Having a show set in one place allows for recurring characters. I enjoyed it, and it is believable that these guys grew up to be their older counterparts counterparts. I do find it funny that this was the first show after they spent years surrounding Scooby and his companions with supernatural beings like the Boo Brothers and 13 Go Scooby-Doo, and now they're just 10-year-olds. Yogi Bear was a character that originated in the Huckleberry Hound show and then got his own spin-off show called The Yogi Bear Show. The show has 3 segments: Yogi Bear, Snagglepuss, and Yaki Doodle. The Yogi Bear segment was about Yogi and Boo Boo trying to steal picnic baskets while Ranger Smith tries to stop them. There's also Cindy the Bear. The Snagglepuss segment is about this pink mountain lion just trying to live his best life, and this hater of a hunter called Major Minor tries to get him. The Yaki Doodle segment was about this little dog and his friend Chopper living their best lives, and Yaki is almost eaten by Fibber the Fox or Alfie the Alligator. This show started in 1961. It only lasted a year, producing 2 seasons with 33 episodes. But this show truly stood the test of time, as Yogi Bear is still a recognizable character. There were numerous spin-offs and feature films. The most recent addition to the Yogi Bear franchise was the show Jellystone. Whenever I see Yogi Bear, I always remember that parody of them in The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. That was scary. As we all know by now, a long-lived franchise seems to always venture into the realm of the spin-off baby. The Yogi Bear spin-off baby was called Yo Yogi, and here we see Yogi Bear riding a skateboard. Oh, and now he's solving mysteries. You know, very similar to the Yogi we all know and love. These two own a mall now. Crazy. Our gang of teenage mystery solvers was composed of Yogi Bear, Boo Boo Bear, Huckleberry Hound, Snagglepuss, and Cindy. They no longer hang out in the Jellystone Park. They now hang out in Jellystone Mall. Ranger Smith still exists, but now he's security guard Smith, and for some reason Dick Dastardly and Muttley are there, causing havoc like their characters normally do. In the first episode, they get chased by a picnic table being carried by bees, which feels like a callback to the Yogi Bear picnic stealing ways. The show only had 1 season with 13 episodes. I would say this has to be one of the most different spin-off babies from the content it's based off of. They are not even in the park anymore. These kids are in the mall with clothes, so either they do not grow up to be their older counterparts, or they all decided to live naked in the woods for some reason. This was just a regular teen show, and they slapped Yogi Bear onto it. The Jungle Book movie was based on a book of the same name that came out in 1894. The animated movie Jungle Book came out in 1967. The movie starts with a boy being found in the jungle. That boy was later named Mowgli. Then the movie skips 10 years. Mowgli is being raised by a pack of wolves. When the wolves realize Mowgli's in danger because he is human, they must do something. The movie follows multiple animals trying to keep Mowgli safe. This movie made $378 million after having $4 million budget. Such a successful movie is not surprising this franchise had a life outside of this film. In 1994, there was a live action. Then in 2003, there was Jungle Books 2. Then 14 years later, they made a live action animated movie in 2016. Obviously, since I'm talking about it, they eventually made a spin-off baby. It was called Jungle Cubs, which is an animated series where we see younger versions of all the main characters from the Jungle Book except for Mowgli because he was not born yet. The show is designed to teach friendship and working together and show the audience how the relationships that were in the initial movie were formed. This show ran for 2 seasons and 21 episodes from 1996 to 1998. Slightly off topic, but 2016 Jungle Book uses the wrong type of bear. In that movie, Baloo is a brown bear, but he was originally a sloth bear. This is sloth bear erasure, and I will not stand for it. These characters could believably grow into their older counterparts in the Jungle Book movie, and I found the designs cute. Clifford the Big Red Dog was initially a book series that started in 1963, and it had the 93 books in its series. The first 91 were published before the author's death, and the last 2 were published after. Some of the book titles are Clifford's Bath Time, Clifford's Busy Week, Clifford the Weather Dog, Clifford's First Sleepover, and many more. In the year 2000, the Clifford the Big Red Dog animated series came out. It revolved around the 20-foot tall dog called Clifford. He did not start out as a big dog. When his owner, Emily Elizabeth, got him, he was the runt of the litter, but apparently Emily Elizabeth loved him so much that he grew to 25 feet tall. When they originally got Clifford, Emily Elizabeth and her family lived in some flat, but they had to move to Birdwell Island so they had enough room for Clifford to live. So in this show, the episodes are split into 2 segments. In the first, Clifford and his friends, Cleo, T-Bone and Matt, were off doing dog stuff and causing accidental havoc. Other times, the story would follow Emily Elizabeth, who was accompanied by her friends Jetta, Waz and Charlie. Other segment was story time with Speckle, which was when Emily Elizabeth would read a story to the fictitious dog called Speckle and his adventure with his other animal friends. Clifford the Big Red Dog ran till 2003 with 2 seasons and 65 episodes. In 2019, they made a new anime series. The art style reminds me of Charlie and Lola. The show ran for 3 seasons with 39 episodes, concluding in 2021. Whilst the show ended in 2021, they also made a new live action / animated movie. They had a successful book series, successful movies and TV show. So of course they made a spin-off baby called Clifford's Puppy Days, showing what life was like for the Howard family before Clifford grew to be the size of a house. In this show, both Emily Elizabeth and Clifford have different friends, but I would say the most glaring difference from the original series to this is Clifford was not Emily Elizabeth's first pet. Before Clifford, she had a rabbit called Daffodil, who is not in the original series, suggesting she might have died before they moved, or they just left her in a city. This show ran from 2003 to 2006 with 2 seasons and 39 episodes. The idea of a young Clifford did not start in the 2000s. There was actually a book called Clifford Puppy Days that was published in 1989. There was also Clifford Puppy Days Fun, and the other book that was made in the Puppy Days series was Christmas Angel. This is definitely a series that would not have worked if Clifford was older. In a lot of these shows that I talk about, the aging down of the character does not change anything, but this is something that needs to be aged down, because Clifford could not be going on his little adventures at 25 foot tall. Watching how much Clifford and Emily Elizabeth cared for their friends and they had to abandon them to live on Birdwell Island makes me kind of sad, and I wish Emily Elizabeth loved Clifford a little less so he would outgrow so big. I will say this was one of the shows I had never seen before and it was very enjoyable. Total Drama Island was a parody of survival shows made for teens and kids. It came out in 2007 and ran for 6 seasons and 145 episodes, concluded in 2014. Throughout those 6 seasons, the cast changed. All of the campers were 16 years old and some of them were definitely duped to joining, especially in the first season. Throughout the show, we see 2 teams of campers competing for the prize of $100,000. The show is full of alliances, backstabbing, and surprise twists. The show is aimed at an older audience of teens, so it's quite shocking to me that they decided to make a spin-off baby of this show. Total Drama Rama was another show that just copied the blueprint that Muppet Baby had made, so they turned all their teenage characters into toddlers and stuck them in a daycare and let chaos ensue. This show mainly has the original cast of Total Drama Island, like Courtney, Duncan, Gwen, Owen, and LaShawna, and it does have younger versions of campers from other seasons like Lightning, Sugar, Ella, and so on. The one taking care of the kids is Chef. He is much nicer to the kids than he was in the original show because beefing toddlers is not acceptable, but poisoning teenagers is, I guess. Thankfully, Chris, Noah, and they're these innocent children, and we only see him on TV. We see Don, the host of the Redonkulous race, in this universe too, briefly. The kids are far safer in the show than in the original, but sometimes they do get themselves into dangerous situations. Rather than that madman tormenting them, they're doing it to themselves, which is more excusable because they're toddlers. In the first episode, the kids crawl into the vents and drop out of the ceiling, and Duncan drops himself out of the roof, which is part of my favourite recurring bit in the show of Duncan constantly trying to escape the daycare. This show is not as bad as people make it seem. It's just not aimed at the same audience that Total Drama Island is. Also, some characters from 16 appear in this show. Whilst the show is definitely not trying to be a prequel to Total Drama, as all the campers didn't meet until the first season, total versions of them are pretty similar personality, and it is believable that these guys could have grown up to be their older counterparts. As I mentioned before, it followed the same formula of putting their characters in a daycare, like Muppet Babies and Baby Looney Tunes, but this is more believable since these guys are human. Archie's is a comic book series that started in 1942 and ran for over 70 years. The comic book series revolves around the lives of Archie Andrews, Betty Cooper, Veronica Lodge, and Jughead Jones, as well as other characters that have appeared throughout the series' long history. You might recognize some of those names, as this is the source material of Riverdale. The comic series has had a dozen shows and films based on it, such as the Archies, Archies to Riverdale and Back, Archies in Jugman, the Archie Show, the Archie Comedy Hour. There was a lot. So, as I have said numerous times at this point, it is not shocking that such a long-running franchise made a spin-off baby. Normally, the characters are in high school, but this version, they're in junior high. This has to be one of the most boring of the spin-off babies. Nothing really happened. I watched an episode where there was an alien, uninteresting, and then another episode where Betty and Veronica were competing against each other to be class president. I was so unentertained, and apparently other people were, but this show only had one season with 13 episodes. This show was really nothing new in the world of spin-off babies. Now to talk about another show that stemmed from an Archie comic. We have Sabrina the Teenage Witch. There are two main things people know the character of Sabrina Spellman from. First, the 1996 show Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which has the same name as the comic and lasted many seasons and followed her from high school into adulthood. Second is the Netflix show The Chilling Adventure of Sabrina. The character Sabrina Spellman first appeared in the comic Archie's Madhouse and then continued to appear in some other Archie stuff before appearing in her own comic series called Sabrina the Teenage Witch. The first issue of that came out in 1971. Sabrina Spellman is a 16-year-old who is half witch, half mortal, and she is torn between the two worlds. I made a whole video about her if you want to deep dive into that. The main thing you need to know is she lives with her aunt Hilda and Zelda, and normally her talking cat Salem, who's the true star a lot of the time. Sabrina technically has two spin-off babies, the first being Sabrina the anime series, where she's 12 years old, and that came out in 1999 with 1 season and 65 episodes. Then 4 years later, in 2003, Sabrina's Secret Life came out with 1 season and 26 episodes, where she was 14 years old. These two shows were both spin-off babies of the 90s live action and had quite a few differences from the 90s live action one. Characters like Uncle Quincy, Chloe Fang, Gemstone, Queen Enchantra, and Maurizia do not appear in the live action, but they did have core characters like Harvey Kinkle, her aunts, and Salem. I do find it funny how between these two shows that are clearly connected, they did get rid of key characters like Sabrina's uncle, who just disappeared after the first show, and they never mentioned him again. The other characters that don't make it into the second show make sense because kids move away all the time, but Sabrina just lost a family member and they never mentioned him. This show has the shortest time difference between the original media, other than Clifford Puppy Days to Clifford the Big Red Dog. It's only 2 years. This show is clearly not meant to be set in the same universe as the live action, so Sabrina did not move in living with her aunts until just before her 16th birthday, and she found out on the morning of her 16th birthday she is a witch. But in this show, Sabrina seems to know she's a witch from childhood. But Sabrina recklessly using magic with little to no care about the consequences is very on brand for the character. This show was aimed at a younger audience, clearly trying to teach moral lessons, and that's fine. I do prefer the 1996 version though. Iron Man has been a superhero in Marvel Comics for a long time. He first appeared in Tales of Suspense that came out in 1962, goes own comic book series 6 years later in 1968 called Iron Man. Iron Man's real name is Tony Stark. He ran a weapons manufacturing company. After being captured and injured in a war zone, he created the Iron Man suit to escape and eventually became the superhero Iron Man. Iron Man was the first film in the now very popular film and TV franchise, which is called the MCU. After the success of the first Iron Man film, they decided to make a spin-off baby, what a shocker, called Iron Man Armored Adventures. This shows about 17-year-old Tony Stark investigating his father's death. His mother died when he was young, but his dad died in a plane crash that both he and his father were in. The only reason Tony survived because he had his Iron Man suit. In the show, there are also younger versions of Rodney and Pepper who help him with his Iron Man stuff. There's also a bunch of other Marvel characters such as Black Widow, Doctor Doom, Hulk, and Nick Fury, but those characters will not age down even though they are normally the same age as Tony Stark. The show ran from 2009 to 2012 with 2 seasons. When Iron Man 1 came out, the movie said that Tony's parents died when he was 17. Later it was changed, they died when he was older, but this show came out and it was based on the first Iron Man. Also, this show would not have worked if Tony's parents were alive. It would have been a very boring show because I doubt his parents would have given him full access to all their money to do all the Iron Man stuff he's doing after his dad dies in the show. I also find it interesting how they give him more of a stereotypical hero life where he's living a double life and no one knows he is Iron Man, which is kind of required since he's going to school. We Bare Bears started out a webcomic called The Three Bear Bears that came out in 2009. We Bare Bears, the show, came out on Cartoon Network in 2015. The show was about the 3 bears, Grizzly, Panda, and Ice Bear. For some reason, they do not do bear stuff very often and act more like humans and even make some human friends such as Chloe, Isaac, Park Ranger Tabs, as well as some non-human friends that they know such as Nom Nom and Bigfoot. This show ran for 4 seasons from 2015 to 2019, amassing over 140 episodes and a movie. We Baby Bears is a spin-off baby of the show. The bears make a wish on a shooting star, which transforms this cardboard box into a dimensional traveling machine that allows them to explore a bunch of new worlds as they look for a new home. They travel to many places, but each place has something wrong with it, so they decide not to make it their home, and often whilst they are looking around, they get into some sort of trouble and have to find a solution. It has 2 seasons and 63 episodes, and is apparently going to have another season. I really feel like the bears needed to be de-aged for this show. They could have found a magical box big enough for the 3 adult ones. And yes, We Bare Bears is not rooted in realism, but We Baby Bears having a magical box that travels to different dimensions seems a bit far-fetched, even for the talking bear show. This is very much another show that puts on the skin of a popular franchise when it could have been any characters. This is not a uniquely bear situation that only these 3 bears could have been put in. DC Comics is one of the largest and oldest comic companies in the US, starting in 1935 as National Comic Book Publications. 2 years later, it was changed to Detective Comics, which is what DC stands for. So yes, the name of the company is Detective Comics, but that's not important. Over the 90 years, it has made such iconic characters like Batman, Superman, Flash, Teen Titans, the Green Lanterns, Booster Gold, Nightwing, Blue Beetle, Aquaman, and that's just the heroes. The villains are also quite well known. When talking about comics, it tends to be very male focused, so they decided to make a show around some of the big heroines in DC Comics. Then they aged them all down, which led to DC Superhero Girls. DC Superhero Girls is set in a fictitious city called Metropolis. In this city, Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Batgirl, Bumblebee, Green Lantern, and Zatanna are all high school students. The show is meant to show the start of all their superheroing journeys. The show starts with the Gordon family moving to the city, and Barbara Gordon is determined to become a superhero like Batman. Diana has just come from Themyscira and is still adapting to the world around her. Kara is a short-tempered character. Zatanna's magic often gets her in trouble as her spells have a mind of their own. Jessica is a pacifist superhero, and Karen is a shy genius of the group. The show started in 2019 and lasted 2 seasons with 78 episodes and concluded in 2021. They also have a superhero short series and a web series, as well as a multitude of crossovers. It was nice seeing characters that don't normally get the spotlight have more focus. Wonder Woman, Batgirl, and Supergirl are used fairly often in DC Comics media, but Jessica Cruz's Green Lantern and Bumblebee are seen far less. I did think aging down these characters so a younger audience finds it easier to dive into the world of DC heroes is good, considering how much DC content there is. Madagascar is an animated franchise that started in 2005. The first movie is about this lion, giraffe, zebra, and hippo that live in a New York zoo. These animals escape from the zoo but are eventually captured. The zoo said, "Oh, since you want freedom, we'll give you freedom," and they shipped them off to a nature reserve in Kenya. On their way to Kenya, these penguins hijack their mode of transportation, and our main characters fall out and end up in Madagascar. After the success of the first movie, it had 2 sequel movies and a spin-off movie about the popular penguin characters called Penguins of Madagascar. Then that movie got its own spin-off series, so this franchise was very successful. 15 years after the first movie, they decided to make a spin-off baby called Madagascar A Little Wild. I watched an episode or two. This just reminds me of Penguins of Madagascar, the series. If you've seen that, you've seen this spin-off baby. It's just a lot of misunderstandings and little adventures around our main characters. Neither the penguins nor the lemurs appeared in the show. Also, they are singing in each episode. The series was 8 seasons long with 50 episodes that ended in 2022. It's a charming show. None of the characters are too different from the original characters. Now to mix things up, Ellen DeGeneres is a former talk show host who is most well known for her show, The Ellen DeGeneres Show, which ran from 2003 to 2022. And after a very public controversy, she decided to end her show. She's also the voice of Dory. I'm going to be very honest, I don't know why she got an animated show. Other than Dory, Ellen is not really known for making kids content, but it was a bit shocking to find out she had one. I watched a couple episodes. It's just about a girl in New Orleans and her two friends, Becky and Freckle, doing kid stuff. In one episode, Ellen's cousin Helen comes to visit, but she's so cool that Ellen starts to feel jealous and insecure. But then she learns that she has value or whatever. In another episode, they went to a fair with her grandma and friends. Nothing too crazy happened in the show. It was just a regular girl. The show had 2 seasons of 20 episodes from 2021 to 2022. There is apparently 20 unaired episodes that were made but never aired due to the controversy I mentioned earlier. It's kind of hard to compare a kids animated show to a talk show. The show was just about learning to solve problems that kids might go through as they are learning about the world and growing up. And you could argue this doesn't count, but I'm counting it with spin-off baby. Winnie the Pooh has been around since 1924, over 100 years ago. He was originally called Edward Bear, so I'm glad they changed it. Winnie the Pooh started off as a storybook character inspired by a teddy that is based off a real bear that was at London Zoo. The bear's dead now. Pooh Bear started appearing in his own book, in the first book called Winnie the Pooh. Then numerous other books came out like The House at Pooh Corner, Return to 100 Acres Wood, and The Best Bear in the World. Over the course of the series, it introduced us to characters like Eeyore, Kanga, Owl, Tigger, and many others. Finding out Christopher Robin was based on the author's son with new information. You learn something new every day. Piglet is also inspired by real-life Christopher Robin's toy. Since the 1960s, Disney has been making Winnie the Pooh media, such as Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2, and the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Recently, Winnie the Pooh has become public domain in the US. Winnie the Pooh starred in a horror movie called Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, because that was really what the franchise needed. In recent years, I have learned that a lot of people thought Piglet was a girl, which is crazy to me. Probably the same people who thought Blue from Blue's Clues was a boy. Anyway, over the course of the last 100 years, Winnie the Pooh and all his friends have become favourites in society, so it's not surprising that it got a spin-off baby. The spin-off baby is called Playdate with Winnie the Pooh, started in 2023, and so far has 15 episodes and is set in the same universe as me and Winnie the Pooh. This show is just an aged-down version of the 100 Acre Woods characters, but the personalities have been stripped from them. The most you could say, Piglet is slightly anxious. They also introduced a new character called Bee, who is a beaver. The main reason I'm confused about this one is Winnie the Pooh was already aimed at a preschool demographic, and usually the reason they age down character is to make them more appealing to a different demographic. This franchise was already designed for that demographic. I can't believe they would just leave young Pooh in the forest, but Kelby, he's a bear, and they live in the woods. Yeah, Pooh Bear is a bear, a teddy bear. He is canonically made of fabric. Let's hope he does not run into a real bear, because that would not end well. Spider-Man is a superhero that does whatever a spider can, swinging from web and eating his significant others. Kidding, but he did once give his wife radiation poisoning. He has been around since 1962. His powers are his spidey sense, meaning he can sense when danger is coming, superhuman strength, he is smart and made his web shooters so he can swing from web. He is one of Marvel's most well-known superheroes. He has had several animated series, movies, so getting a spin-off baby is not shocking. The spin-off baby is called Spidey and His Amazing Friends, that came out in 2021. That has gone on 4 seasons and 91 episodes and is still going on. Peter Parker, or as they called him in the show, Spidey, is the main character of the show and has his normal Spider-Man powers that he has in the comic. He uses his intelligence to make his own inventions like Webster, the supercomputer that helps superheroes, as well as Tracy, the Spider-Bot. And of course, Spidey has his well-known Spider-Man power of turning into a dinosaur, Spidey Rex. Moving on, Miles Morales is also in this, but his Spider-Man name is Spin. He can become invisible and sting people. Oh, and he obviously turns into a dinosaur too, a Stegosaurus, aka Dino Spin. Then lastly, we have Gwen Stacy, aka Ghost Spider. She can glide through the air. When I guess the dinosaur she turns into a pterosaur, and when I looked it up, what that is people saying it's not actually a dinosaur, so she is a fraud. The show is teaching kids lies. I get that superhero stories already have teenagers fighting crime, but I feel like 6-year-olds fighting crime is pushing it. How are you beefing someone who just learned their alphabet? Crazy. This show is still going on with 4 seasons so far and 91 episodes. Whilst I was watching the show, all I could think about is the kids who only know this version of Spider-Man, then going to watch the live action version and waiting for Andrew, Toby and Tom turn into T-Rexes, and I find that funny. Comic books change their canon all the time, and they contain so many alternate universes, so it's fine that they changed Spider-Man into a dinosaur, I guess. It was just really shocking to me. The de-aging of the characters in this show are so random. Doc Ock, Black Cat and Ant-Man are all de-aged, but the Thing and other characters are the age that they typically are. Also, the theme song for this show is written and performed by Patrick Stump from Fall Out Boy. Inspector Gadget has been around since 1983, starting with the animated series. This series follows this guy called Inspector Gadget, trying to stop the evil schemes of the villain Dr. Claw. Around the world, Inspector Gadget is deemed a hero and the world's greatest inspector, but in actual fact, Inspector Gadget is an incompetent fool, and the only reason his cases get solved is because of his niece and her dog Brain. That initial show ran for 2 seasons with 86 episodes and concluded in 1985. After that, there were multiple films, both live action and animated. There has also been multiple spin-offs and reboots like Gadget and the Gadgetines, where we learn that Gadget's stupidity stressed his niece's dog out so much he had to be put in a mental health facility due to this man. In 1995, the spin-off baby of Gadget Boy and Heather came out. This show is about a young Gadget Boy and a woman called Heather who works an agency called, and Heather has to watch over the bionic boy. G9 is a robotic dog who can transform into anything that might help his friends out. The main villain of the show is called Spydra, and she's this evil woman who will do anything to become rich beyond her wildest dreams. She has this vulture, and if she takes off her mask, she could turn people to stone. In season 2 of the show, they decided to start time traveling, so Spydra was going through time, committing evil deeds, and the other guy to follow her. This change occurred because the standards of TV changed, and TV shows aimed at kids had to be educational, so they decided to try and teach history. I will say, this is the show that uses the least amount of characters from the original show. None of these characters appear in the original show. However, it's obvious that the main characters are meant to be based off of the main characters in the original Inspector Gadget. Like Heather is meant to be Penny, G9 is meant to be Brain, Chief Stromboli is meant to be Chief Quimby, and so on. The show lasted 2 seasons with 52 episodes, ending in 1998. I also made a full video about Inspector Gadget if you want more details about him. The Pink Panther has been around since 1963 as a movie starring Inspector Clouseau, who is always trying to solve a mystery in all of his movies. The Pink Panther, the character that we all know and love, appears in the opening and closing of those movies. That was all he was until he got his big break outside of the movies. First, there was a series of shorts that started in 1964. Actual big break was in 1969, and he got his first TV show called The Pink Panther Show, which lasted till 1971. After becoming a character outside the original movies, he's now his own star, appearing in video games and comics. So it's in no way unbelievable that Mr. Panther over here got his own spin-off baby. Pink Panther and Pow was my introduction to the world of Pink Panther. I have watched the live action movies and older cartoons. I'm going to be very honest, I did not realize this was a spin-off baby. He just has slightly chubbier cheeks. They could have made him smaller. All of the cartoon characters are their normal ages, other than Pink Panther, who is apparently meant to be a teenager. He looks exactly the same. How was I meant to tell? The Pink Panther and Pow episodes were split up into 2 segments. The Pink Panther segment, where, as usual, the Pink Panther accidentally causes havoc. Then the second segment is Ant and Aardvark, which is just a cat and mouse chase. If you've seen Tom and Jerry, Wile E. Coyote, and the Roadrunner, then you've seen Ant and Aardvark. It's just that, but in a jungle. This show only had 1 season with 26 episodes that came out in 2010, which is crazy because I remember watching this all the time. I can't tell if it's a good or bad thing that I could not tell he was a teenager in the show. Good because he has the same personality, so he could grow into his older version. Bad because if there was no discernible difference, what was the point of aging him down? Bratz was a TV series based on a very successful toy brand called Bratz. Bratz, the TV series, came out in 2005 and followed the lives of these 4 16-year-old girls who run a teen magazine called Bratz. They still have to do normal teenage stuff like go to school and flirt with boys. They had a bunch of 3D and 2D animated movies that came out set in the same universe as the TV show, such as Bratz Rock Angels, Bratz Genie Magic, Bratz Passion for Fashion, and a few more. The Bratz Kids and Bratz Babies came out between 2006 and 2008. I would say the Bratz Kids and Bratz Baby was set in an alternative universe because of the aliens and the magic, but in the TV show, the Bratz school gets invaded by aliens, and in the movies connected to the TV series, there are genies and magic, so who knows if this is set in the same universe. There were 3 Bratz Baby movies: Bratz Baby the movie, Bratz Super Baby, and Bratz Baby Save Christmas. The first movie is about the Bratz and friends going to daycare, and one of them brings a dog, and it escapes, and it is held hostage by this teenager who extorts them for money. Bratz Super Baby is about the encounters with these potato aliens, which results in the Bratz getting superpowers. And the last is Bratz Baby Save Christmas, which is about the Bratz having the worst Christmas ever. The parents who were on vacation get trapped there, so they won't make it home for Christmas. Then they overhear someone they believe to be Santa saying they wouldn't be able to deliver, so the girls become determined to save Christmas. There were 2 Bratz Kids movies, Bratz Sleepover Adventures and Bratz Fairy Tale. The first movie is about the Bratz going to a sleepover at the new girl in town's house called Ginger. When night comes, the girls start telling scary stories and things start getting weird. The second Bratz Kids movie, the Bratz are meant to perform the classic fairy tales, but the Bratz start insulting the fairy tale leads, so they get kidnapped and forced to live out those fairy tales. All of those movies were set when the Bratz are 2 2 to 8 years old, at least half the age of the regular Bratz. I do think aging down the Bratz added to these movies because if they were any older, their level of naivety in certain situations would not be believable. Them getting duped by the villains in Bratz Babies, Saved Christmas, and Bratz Super Babies would not have happened if they were 16-year-olds. Plus, it is in no way unrealistic for them to be doing all this because, as I mentioned before, their 16-year-old self were also dealing with magic and aliens. I would like to remind you, this is a universe about a group of girls running a fashion magazine. I don't know how this many crazy stuff happens to them. It's insane. They also turned into spies at one point. And that was all the spin-off babies I researched. A lot of people think all spin-offs should be banned and they have no point, but I disagree with that. I have no problems with reboots, revivals, or spin-offs as long as they add something to the story and not just there to squeeze out money out of a fandom. Like The Flash, which is a spin-off of Arrow, Barry Allen and all his friends and family built a world of their own that did not need to cling on to the success of Arrow to keep it going. A revival like Doctor Who has added so much lore to the Whoniverse and helped give some stories a conclusion. The current reboot to the DCU has been a breath of fresh air and has given more comic accurate portrayals of characters, and I am loving it. So sometimes trying again is not a bad thing. As I mentioned earlier in this video, not all of these shows are trying to be prequels to the things that came before them. A lot of them are obviously in alternative universes, so I was not trying to be too harsh with the comparisons to the original media, but some of these were just original shows with the IPs painted onto them. When talking about spin-off babies, it's often hard to gather whether the negative comments are genuine reviews from people who have watched it. Then there are others who just hate on something because it's new. Some of these shows were not good, and I will probably never watch them again. But some shows like Pup Named Scooby-Doo, Muppet Babies, DC Superhero Girls, Gadget Boy, Iron Man Armored Adventures, and a couple others are decent shows that may or may not live up to their original. But I do believe kids could enjoy watching these shows. Looking at the progression of spin-off babies from the Muppet Babies to the more recent ones, the biggest difference I would say is 2D animation to 3D animation, which a lot of modern animation, even Inspector Gadget and Franklin, are all 3D. I also noticed a lot of these are very short-lived. Some only last one season, like Yo-Yogi, Pink Panther and Pals, Archies. A lot of other ones only last 2 seasons. So obviously, using previously successful franchises to make a spin-off baby does not always guarantee success. There are a bunch of other tropes in media, like spin-off, which are the show movies centered around the children of the main character from a previous movie or show, and I do want to cover that trope at some point, so tell me if you want to see it. That will be all. Have a good day. Tell me your favorite spin-off baby. Goodbye.